Yeah, thanks both. Thanks all for coming as well. So yeah, really great to be here today, and thanks for the time. I was just going to give you a bit of a quick overview of me and then I'll dig into what we're going to talk about today. So I'm Pete Burnap. I'm Professor of Data Science and Cybersecurity at Cardiff University in the UK. So I've grown the Centre for Cybersecurity Research over the last 10 years. We've now got about 50 FTE. I also spent 6 years in industry working for Airbus, where I led AI for cyber innovation across the European cluster. And I'm now running the Cyber Innovation Hub in Wales, which I'll go into a bit more detail about. But this is the real bit that we're going to talk about today, and really drill into the OT live environment of facilities that we've got that can support active cyber research and training and other bits and pieces. So yeah, if you bear with me for the first sort of 10 or 15 minutes, I'll just give you a brief overview of Cardiff University's research capability, particularly focusing around some of the OT relevant stuff. Then I'll give you an overview of what Cyber Innovation Hub is, which is a little bit more general than the environment, but I think it'll be of interest to you all anyway. So I'll just cover those. Then I'll dig into a bit more detail in terms of the lab facility, if that's all right. So I'll as people have got to leave, I'll try and keep this overview to sort of 20 minutes tops, and then you can ask questions then and whatever else. Let me just share this screen and put that in full window. Grand. All right. So yeah. So yeah, very briefly, Cardiff University is based in the UK. It's one of the universities that has recognition by the National Cybersecurity Centre, essentially the leading technical authority in the UK, as an academic centre of excellence in cybersecurity research and in cybersecurity education. So there's only 3 universities in the whole UK that have got both of those recognitions, and shows our dedication to both research and upskilling. So very briefly, in terms of what we do, sorry, this is a messy slide, but this is 50 FTEs worth of researchers all pulled together on one slide. So if you focus on the blue boxes initially, what we effectively look at is, starting on the left-hand side, risk assessment and modeling. So we do a lot of work that tries to move away from your classic spreadsheet-based asset vulnerability threat impact matrix, which people do for the sake of ISO 27001 and then leave alone and don't do much with. We're trying to move towards more living, breathing risk assessment types of models, where we've actually focused on things like goal-oriented risk models. So looking at what are you trying to achieve, and asking iterative questions like what does that depend on, what does that depend on, building directed graphs of dependencies, applying mathematical models to those, so we can say if something happens where in your supply chain, what's the knock-on effect cascading back through your organization. So risk assessment and modeling we've done quite a bit in. Moving that then into effectively playbooks, collective decision making, governance, risk management and communication. As you can see on the far left of the screen, we have quite an interdisciplinary group. Obviously, we've got lots in computer science with the technical capability, but also lots in criminology, psychology, and law and politics. That's where the governance, collective decision making comes in as well. So lots of human-centric activities going on there. And then the final pillar then around AI, machine learning for threat intelligence, but also automated cyber defense. So we developed one of the first ransomware detection models that also actually then killed the underlying processes to block the ransomware in real time. So we were able to detect ransomware within 4 seconds at 95% accuracy, and then reduce file encryption by over 80% by killing those processes. So that's an example of that kind of work. And we also look at the safety and security of ML and AI. So we're currently done some work with a high-res organization looking at what does good AI look like? How do you understand when AI is doing something it shouldn't be doing? When do you need to retrain it, etc., etc. You'll notice then that there's an arrow that comes off that and goes all the way back around to risk assessment and modeling. This is because our philosophy is not just to flag there's an attack, something's going on, very much like a sort of a SEAM environment. It's really to try and think about, well, how do we then play that into risk, and what does that mean for us, and how do we make decisions based on something happening? How do we look at confidence levels and feed that into how people make collective decisions and so on? So it's a very iterative and real-time approach to cyber defense. Cutting through the top of it all the way through is the human factors element. So this is essentially why do people fall for cyber attacks? Why do people behave in a secure way or not? What are the trust and dynamics associated with collective decision making, but also sort of partnerships between AI and people in terms of security operations centers. So that's largely driven by our School of Psychology. So I just wanted to give you that overview and that background, because all of this, of course, applies to OT. And you can see as well, we've got key partnerships here with the likes of Airbus and Thales, who are global players in OT, looking at effectively working with them to define problems that we then conduct research on. I won't go into the rest of it there, but effectively that gives you a flavour of the kind of things that we do. So if I move then on to Cyber Innovation Hub. So Cyber Innovation Hub is effectively Wales's national investment in cybersecurity. And our target is to really focus on the critical mass, I suppose you'd call it, of actors in the Cardiff capital region. So this is the area around Cardiff, about anywhere within an hour of Cardiff, basically, where we do have key players like Airbus, Thales, CGI, PwC, multiple university actors, a growing cybersecurity small to medium cluster, and various other bits and pieces that are going on. The investment has been made by the Welsh government. So Wales is a nation, obviously, with its own economy making powers, its own skills and education decision making powers, and its own budget to invest in things that it wants to grow around the economy and social prosperity. And we also have the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal Fund, which is UK government money, effectively aiming to do the same thing. So they've both partnered together to get behind the Cyber Innovation Hub. And our mission basically is to grow the cluster. So you can see our KPIs there to build 25 new cyber startups. So these typically are coming from university ideas spun into commercial ventures, and also upskilling a talent pipeline, so that we're effectively trying to get other organizations to come and put their cybersecurity arm here in and around Cardiff with this pipeline of talent that we're building. So I'll just explain, I suppose, the differentiators for this as well, because this is not a typical university project. Effectively, it's a partnership between Cardiff University, University of South Wales, the Alacrity Foundation, and Tramshed Tech. And effectively, where we're moving towards is like a company, a sort of a non-profit company that's going to run on its own 2 feet within the next few years, to help and grow and build that cluster. There's 3 pillars to this. One of it is infrastructure, and that's the main bit I'll focus on after just giving you an overview of these first 2. So obviously in a university, we do lots of skills stuff. We got degrees, masters, undergraduates, etc. But Cyber Innovation Hub is more about rapid reskilling, and it's not about qualifications and accreditation. It's about, can you learn the skills and develop the knowledge you need to be able to do your job practically. So we've set up, after extensive engagement with industry, 1 to 3 day upskilling courses, actually 1 to 4 days now. So 1 to 4 day upskilling courses on basically a chili level, so a sort of a Nando's chili level. 1 chili being very much an introduction, I know nothing about cybersecurity, 2 chili being a little bit more technical, and 3 chili being sort of advanced technical. In terms of the landscape of skills training, I would say this is below the level of training that you might provide if you went to somewhere like SANS, for example. And this provides a pipeline and brings people up that ladder and journey within your organization, so that you can then put them on things like SANS and advanced practitioner training and so on. So that's where we sit in the scheme of things. If you go on to Cyber Innovation Hub Wales, you can see the web link on the bottom of the brochure there. There's an online brochure. You can see all the courses that are available. The screenshot there is a snapshot of the web page, and you can see that we do a fundamentals, a beginner, and an intermediate at the moment operational technology short course. So this takes people who have no understanding of OT up to a level where they're doing things like network analysis, packet capture, understanding the devices on the network, asset discovery, understanding the vulnerabilities of those devices. And we're currently working on a 3 chili top level one, which is more like understanding PLC attacks and securing PLCs against packet modification attacks, etc. So very relevant, I think, for you folks. We can also run bespoke boot camps. So we can put a collection of 1 to 3 day courses together to make like a 2-week or 3-week course. The reason we've done 1 to 3 days is because employers didn't want people out for that amount of time, but we could do either or. So that's the skills stuff. We're also building new startups to solve problems that haven't been solved. So I mentioned earlier, we've got a bunch of industry partners, and we do a lot of work on research within the university, where we're actually essentially working with industry partners to solve problems. That ransomware example was one example we worked on with Airbus, but we don't tend to spin much out of the university. And from our perspective, my perspective, the reason for that is because spin outs take a lot of work, right? Running a business is not a part-time job. It's a full big time effort, and it's very difficult to do as a full-time academic. So what we've done is we've partnered with the Alacrity Foundation, who are just down the road, who run basically a graduate entrepreneurship program. So what they do is they bring in graduates from, say, business schools, computer science departments, cybersecurity departments, and they put them together on a 12-month program, and then we support them through effectively explaining what it means to do entrepreneurship and build a startup. Now, obviously they're straight out of university and they're not domain experts in cybersecurity, so they lack a little bit in that area of, well, what is the next cutting edge cybersecurity problem? But as I said, within the university, we've got dozens of people completing PhDs every year. We've got academic staff who have deep understanding of this. So effectively, Cyber Innovation Hub is matchmaking people with strong ideas. It could be industry practitioners, it could be PhD students, it could be academics. It doesn't really matter. This is not exclusive to universities. Anyone can apply for this. And matchmaking them with people on the venture building program who are graduate entrepreneurs with commercial expertise, product expertise, and a couple of software developers to basically build that product and take it to market. So one of the things we're doing to make sure these solutions that are developing are market-led is that we are effectively aligning them to problems and solutions that are driven by market sector leaders. So you can see on the right hand side there, we've got a collaboration going between Cyber Innovation Hub and the Alliances guys here, developing podcasts under this banner of CyberSite 25. So CyberSite 25 is basically our challenge to ourselves to get 25 global experts. You've got Ivan there as one example, to sit with us, sit with James mostly, to run these podcasts and explain in your own words as experts, what is the problem that you think exists that isn't solved by the market at the moment? What might a good solution look like? And how would you like to see this sort of brought to market going forward? So you can see there, Ivan's talking about cybersecurity metrics and communication. So he's explained in his own words what the problems are. Now, what that means is our domain experts and our entrepreneurship team can watch these videos and really understand the crux of the problem. And the CyberSite podcast speakers have all agreed to mentor these teams as well. So effectively, that means that once they've got their head around the problem as a team, they can go back to someone like Ivan and say, like, this is where we're thinking, this is where we're at, what do you think, etc. So what that means is that we're not just developing commercial ventures that we think are going to be successful. They're developing commercial ventures that the market is demanding, which is quite unique as well, I think. So these are all there, and the Alliances folks are still looking for more people to come on. So please put your hand up if you're interested in doing one of these things. Right, so on to the main part then, which is the test beds. So again, this is a bit of a snapshot of what we've got on our website, and I'm going to dig into a little bit more detail. But I think what the brief was really for today was to try and explain what we can do in terms of OT live environments and how we can support product validation, testing, verification, etc. So I can explain that. So in our existing labs, we've got a bunch of devices that are effectively, if I just skip forward and then I'll come back, this gives you a picture of our lab as it stands. So you can see in there from the left-hand side, you've got a driver simulator game, which is effectively running the Forza 4, which is just a driver simulator game. But the little black box next to it has got a CAN bus representative operating system in it that actually writes data into the game. So you could just about make out on top of the black box three little red switches and a bunch of little press buttons. What that does is injects packets into the CAN bus, which injects it into the game, that override the vehicle controls. So you can turn the brakes off, you can turn the accelerator off, you can force the steering wheel to turn left, which effectively simulates an attack on a connected vehicle, and then has the driver sat in the vehicle dealing with that problem. PhD students are using that to do packet analysis and understand how they can detect these kind of attacks, anomalous behavior on the CAN bus operating system, and effectively try and rectify that. Also allows us from a human perspective to understand how people respond to these types of attack and how to best communicate you're under cyber attack to them while they're driving the car at speed, was one example. In the middle of the room, you've got a connected sort of transportation smart city infrastructure. There's a little plastic box over the right hand side, which has got a bunch of Siemens, ABB, Schneider PLC controllers in it that we can conduct attacks on. Again, we can turn the lights on and off. We can stop the rail system moving, so we can do simulated real world attacks in that safe, contained environment. The bit on the far right hand side is the manufacturing production facility, which again has got a small production line, mini robot arms controlling those so that we can understand how we can attack those. Underneath them all is, again, PLCs. They're all Python driven robot arms, but they're also controlled via PLCs. And then coming back to the left of the manufacturing facility in the tall grey tower is our cyber range. So the cyber range allows us to develop and build virtual machines that may, for example, be representative of take a manufacturing example, some of the design elements or some of the industrial control IT environment elements. And on the back of that, you can actually plug in your physical devices into the virtual devices, so you can simulate an IT-OT bridge. We've got the ability to create our own virtual machines, drag and drop them together and connect them together in a way that would be realistic. You've got all your various DNS and your various other comms as well. You can have a collection of Windows XP and Windows 12 environments all connected together. World's your oyster on that one. We can stand up about 150 virtual objects, so it's a reasonable size sort of network. Then just in the top circles there, you can see the furthest right and the one in the middle. You can see that's our sort of digital twin, which allows us to create a virtual world. The one in the middle is effectively almost like a Google Maps scaled out world, and then you can zoom into the buildings, you can zoom into the rooms, and you can see the devices in each of the rooms. So the one on the right hand side there is a hospital environment with a MRI scanner in it and various other medical devices. So what we can do there is we can connect that back to the cyber range, so that if you've got attacks on the cyber range and you're attacking some of these virtualized objects, it'll be reflected there in your digital twin, so you can actually see how these things spread through a room, through a building, across a city, etc. So if I go back a slide now, then effectively what we're moving towards now is commercializing that, essentially. So we have cyber engineers to support this, and the facility is available to hire, both of which are on a day rate. We can effectively build that cyber range of your IT infrastructure and OT infrastructure, model your organization. Either you hire the lab and do vulnerability testing, or we can support that. We can build that virtual reality model. So some of the work we're doing on the highways project is we're actually building a VR virtual reality motorway, and adding the vehicles, the road signage, cameras, various elements that would be digital and interconnected, so that again we can simulate what would happen under certain circumstances. So if somebody hacked the road traffic signage, for example, and changed the speed limit from 50 to 90 miles an hour, everyone starts speeding up the road. Or you've got traffic controls where you've got certain lanes closed and certain lanes open. You can change those so everyone filters into the wrong lane and so on. We can simulate all that environment. So we've got that VR capability that we can effectively support your IT response teams, OT response teams, and safety response teams as well, in terms of that prepare, detect, respond. And then, as you've seen from the previous slide, we've got physical industrial control systems as well. So the one example that's a little bit more advanced since I took that initial picture from the last slide is in the middle top here. You've got effectively oil and gas that's an offshore oil and gas rig. That's got various pressure sensors and controllers. I think that's an Emerson control system at the top there as well, and you can see all the various pipes, and it's effectively pressurized airflow that goes through it rather than oil and gas, obviously, but it does the same job. And again, we can build all those and stand those up. In the next 6 months or so, our aim is to have a sort of a smorgasbord of different devices and controllers that we can plug together per your spec, in terms of this is what my system looks like, or at least what a system I'm happy to share with you looks like, that's representative enough that I can do my research on it or my testing on it, where we can just plug these things together for you in real time, and you can come and play in that environment. And as I said, we got the support to be able to help you on that as well while you come and do it. So if I just dig into a little bit more detail, then, because this might be useful for you to just sort of bring it all to life. So this is sort of mostly our current, but also some of our future looking capability. So we've got, if I go down the left hand side there, that cyber range, we've got the IT environment, Active Directory, Windows servers, etc. Open source IT SOC. Then a range of OT environments, which I won't go into here. I'll focus that on the next slide. I've got a whole slide on that one. Also an OT SOC. Then you've got on the right hand side your attacker network. So we can actually then have that, it'll all be set up and partly is already set up to be able to come in, run attacks on these virtualized environments, and then you've got the whole SOC environment, OT and IT, to pick that up. So this is kind of the overarching view of what we've got. But if I dig into this one a little bit more, so what we're trying to provide is as much as we can in terms of like literally device level up to high level, large scale lab infrastructure. So if I start with number one at the top, we've got our virtual open source environments. These are sort of stuff that you can get off the shelf. So things like Fortify, there's a chemical plant in there, there's a rail emulator. So that gives you a little bit more granular detail. But if I go down to number two, then you can see that what we're building here is effectively bespoke virtual reality in Unity, Unreal Engine, where we're actually building various bits and pieces. So our capability here is, if you say, oh, actually, we've got a big manufacturing facility or a big mining facility, whatever, we want to virtualize that so we can actually see what it would look like under attack scenarios, we can build that. Then level three, you're going down into the actual devices. So you've seen a couple of those there. You've got the oil and gas offshore, you've got the manufacturing facility, and then the next elements that we're building in, these should be in the next 4 months, electrical transmission and distribution, and basically, as I said, that sort of PLC wall where we can pull all these things together. And the principle then is that you can perform attacks on the physical environment, which in theory can then be built into being reflected in the virtual reality environment. Now, we haven't got to that point yet where we've got that bridge between the physical and the virtual, but that's largely because we just haven't got the use case yet. We're building this on the fly. We're sort of 18 months into this, so we've got the facility, we've set the facility up. We're now looking for people to work with and build these use cases. In the top right hand side there, effectively what we're doing then is building a 3D citywide environment so that we can actually simulate what happens on the ground, almost like run tabletop exercises. So you can see some of the examples here. We're starting with renewable energy. We've got 3D objects that include windmill farms, battery storage, electrical distribution, that's then all filtering through into manufacturing production systems and smart buildings, so that we can, what you can see in the top right hand corner is 2 tiles there, which includes those objects, which over the next 6 months will be 32 tiles, giving a citywide view of what happens under certain scenarios. And what you'll see then is, you can't quite see it on here, but it's programmed to light up and sort of turn off various elements of the connectivity to show what would happen in the real world. Then you're going right down to the nuts and bolts of very, very precise and small scale OT infrastructure. So what you can see here is the small OT manufacturing PLCs, HMIs that we're using to underpin our OT training. So when I said earlier around the OT training being hands-on, this is what it means. They're effectively learning the principles of OT in the 1 Chile course. Then when they get to the 2 Chile course, they're learning about how do PLCs interact, how do they work with control systems. They're looking at the network traffic and understanding how traffic flows can be used to establish what devices are on the network. both in terms of what's talking to where and what my sort of potential risk is, but also vulnerabilities of particular devices, where updates are needed, security in depth is needed, all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, this is not to say that we've built all of this to to the level that we've got in, for example, an airport, a cement making factory, a roads infrastructure. This is really to say this is capability. We can do this for whatever scenario you come up with, and more than happy to work with you on those scenarios and provide support for you to do that kind of immersive testing and sort of, I guess it's security by design as well, right? It's trying to think about, if I'm going to modify this system and include these new IoT devices in my OT setup, what does that look like? How could that go wrong? We can build and simulate all that and test it so that you can ensure you've got your security architecture right before you go and deploy it. And that's the end of my slides. So yeah, sorry, that was more like 25 minutes rather than 20. Sorry, but hopefully that's given you a good overview of the capability we've got, and more than happy to take any questions.
Well, thanks, Pete. Really appreciate that, mate. I'm blown away by it. But
I'm blown away by it. It's down the road from it. I'm very impressed as that's in Wales, mate. So great effort. Put us on the map.
And I have put out there thinking out loud, Pete. I don't know if you saw it. Would anyone want to come along for a visit? And Meets jumped straight on that because I just want to go on the car, to be honest, and have a go at you taking over the controls and seeing what's happening. But
yeah, you're all welcome.
I know Amit's got his hand up there as well, so I'll chuck over to Amit and I'll get back onto mute just in case it's a bit noisy for everyone. So over to you, Amit.
Cool, thanks. No, it's really, really interesting, and it's what I find really interesting at the moment is I've been to loads of these kind of things over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, and you've never heard about OT, and now it's becoming like a normal conversation starter. So I think it's quite exciting. Just in terms of the last slide you showed, that sort of simulation piece.
Yeah.
So I work for a manufacturing firm, and one of the challenges I've got is the OT estate has been neglected for decades.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the challenges you're dealing with is like this legacy OT, which, to be honest, even I don't quite know how to explain. Right. It's just kind of this aged estate. You got machinery that's being sort of held up by bricks. It's like a real kind of actual physical challenge and a legacy challenge. How do you factor that into your simulations? Because and maybe it wasn't necessarily how you meant it to come across, but it came across as kind of like by design. You would do this, and you can test this, you can test that. How do you factor for? I don't know what it's called. How do you factor for age or
for
neglect?
legacy? Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, so in terms of by design, I guess that is going forward, right? That is, for example, if you're gonna now sensorize all those legacy systems by putting IoT sensors on them, you want to make sure that you've sort of done that and architected it in a way that you've got security designed into that. But then you're right, there is the legacy problem of those devices themselves that are potentially insecure, and well, they are insecure. We know this. It's how do you manage that security? So effectively, this is where the that whole idea of a PLC wall comes in. So speaking to the guys yesterday, for example, they're getting their hands on older Siemens devices at the moment to be able to add into that training course, because the newer Siemens devices, they've overcome some of the issues that were in the older ones. So, but they want to be able to teach, okay, so the newer ones, yeah, this is secure. This is how you secure those. But with the older ones, these are additional problems that you need to factor in. So that the principle is they'd have a range of old and new, so that they can train on top of that. And then, of course, if you're coming and looking at what maybe your actual question then might be, oh well, with these old things that are held up by bricks, where am I vulnerable? And you might then want to build that in our environment, because obviously you don't want to test it in your real environment because you can't. Bring that into our environment and understand what would happen if. And if you end up breaking the PLC, well, you end up breaking the PLC, but at least you're doing it in that safe environment and you know that that's possible. So that's how we're effectively doing it, is we're trying to build the lab with legacy devices in it. So it's not all virtual. It's got a lot of that physical devices in it as well. However, having said that, what they've also built is a virtualized set of PLCs. So I'd need to question them on this, but they've certainly, on the Siemens side, they've got older PLC versions that are virtualized. So you can also do some testing on the virtualized version of a PLC rather than actually on the physical one. So there's a bit of a mix of stuff there.
Cool. I've got loads of questions, so I'll give others a chance. But yeah, I've got loads to gap fill if you need it, James. So I'll pass back to you. But no, thanks for that.
No, mate, if you've got questions, jump in.
No, but if others have got questions, then you know, I want to give people a chance to kind of get in as well.
anyone else got any sort of questions for Pete? If not, then we can. Who's got their hands up? 10. Hi, Tappy. Do you want to jump in?
How's it? Cool, thanks. So thanks a lot, Pete. I was very impressed on your first slide when you mentioned goal-oriented risk assessments, because I've always said to guys, when you do OT, it's not about your normal NIST or ISO. You have to be goal-oriented. Can you just tell me more on how you guys you do that part, or how you came about to do that part, and what sort of risk metrics would you use? Do you have a benchmark for mining oil, or how does it happen?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, absolutely. So this was some work. God, it was about 15 years ago. I wrote an open group standard called Open Dependency Modeling, which was effectively, it was a different way of capturing risk. So effectively, rather than trying to get what you would typically do, perhaps is get all your assets in a list, you look at the vulnerabilities, the potential threat actors, the likelihood, and then trying to calculate the impact of that. But the problem is with cybersecurity, it's very difficult to understand the threats, because as we've just discussed, you've got all the legacy equipment that perhaps you don't even know that exists a problem for it. So that's the challenge. And two, it tends to look at things in isolation. So, you know, if you've got one particular process and you're looking at the impact of that in isolation, well, that's difficult, right? Because actually that process has an impact on other things in the organization. So you really need to consider, one, that you don't know what all your threats are, and two, you don't want to consider impact in isolation. You want to connect these things up. So that's hard to do, because it's, well, what's connected to what? I don't know. So that's why we flipped it around and we said, well, why don't we think about, if you think about an aircraft manufacturer, for example, and they produce wings. So their ultimate goal is to produce wings. So you say, well, what does that depend on? We've got dependency on a supply of materials, dependency on staff, dependency on supply of electricity, open ports, open borders. Okay, all of those, yeah. Well, what do they depend on? So individually, then you ask that same question, and then after you've done this a number of times, what you end up with is your overarching node, which is, we want to build wings, and we built a piece of software that allows you to just drag and drop connections between those. So you end up with a visual graph on the screen that's got everything from your overarching goal to all your dependencies connected together. Then, because it's a graph, effectively you can then you can say, well, this depends on this and this or that, or we can add some redundancy here, so you have another or there, and then you can apply probability to it. And then effectively applying the probability behind the scenes means that if you've got something way down in your supply chain that's I don't know, a supply of a particular piece of materials, what you can say is, well, normally our SLA is that it's 99% likely to be available to us. What if we change that to 50% because they've been ransomware, for argument's sake? Well, you can do that in the model, and it will propagate that 50% change all the way through back up to your overarching goal of your probability of being able to build aircraft wings. So we built a piece of software, and actually going back to the venture building program that I was talking about earlier, we've actually now got a spin-out company that's commercializing that as a piece of software. So if if that is of interest to anyone, I'm more than happy to link you up and have that discussion. So they've basically got a piece of software that allows you to do that. The overhead on that is you have to do that exercise, which is, it's not, as you can imagine, it's not an easy exercise to capture what does everything depend on. But the software is web based, so you could do it in groups and add to it. You could do it online, whatever. You can continually update it, so it's not like a spreadsheet where you need to sort of try and find the connections. You could just add nodes in at any given time. So it's actually a pretty cool piece of software. And as I always say to people who say, well, that's a lot of work to sort of capture what connects to what, I said, well, wouldn't you rather do it now rather than when it's all gone wrong and you've got a supply chain ransomware attack and you don't really know how it's going to impact your business? I think you'd rather do that work now, and then you could do this. They're working now on how to map it to something that's a recognized risk assessment, I suppose. So can you map it to something like ISO 27001 or whatever you need to do in your sectors to get that accreditation and use it as your form of risk assessment that feeds into the bigger framework? So yeah, hopefully that's useful, but happy to pick that up as another discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, cool.
Well, thanks, Pete. Has anyone else got any questions for Pete, or should we jump back to a meet? Because I can see that his mind's racing with all sorts, and that's quite rare as well, Pete, that his mind's racing. No?
I'll chuck another one in because
Yeah, go on, mate.
yeah. So I guess there might be two. There's probably two questions in one here. So what about stakeholders? Because the big difference in OT is the people operating the technology are not necessarily technologists versus IT, where they are technologists pretty much. Right now, the big generalistic statement there, but traditionally that's what it is, right? It's an operating officer or someone that's managing production or output as opposed to a technologist. How do you factor for the education curve with non-technologists, or what would you recommend in that space? And then the other part of the question, they probably start off as two separate questions, but I think they're probably one. In terms of what you're doing, again, I might have misunderstood it, but it's very sort of student-centric by the looks of it in terms of what you're doing in regards to the Innovation Hub. Is there an opportunity to kind of mass market this for probably what's quite a large proportion of the IT community that's looking to move their careers into OT, because that's where the sort of hot topic stuff is happening at the moment? Is there a way to kind of make it mass market so that people, and again, this is a bias because I'm finding I'm working with a lot of IT people who are now being put in OT roles.
Yes.
Who don't necessarily make that 100%. Transition that easily. So
correct.
Yeah, kind 100%. Of it's all about education. But what would you recommend in those spaces?
So this is spot on. So yeah, but perhaps I haven't presented that as I should in terms of those. So those Cyber Innovation Hub short courses are intended for exactly that. So I would so going back to your non-technologist, this is the one Chile course is for non-technologists. This is for people that haven't got a clue about what is OT. It literally starts at the device of what are these devices, how do they communicate, and then it goes through some of the vulnerabilities and previous attacks on those devices to explain to you how vulnerable they are and why you need to think about this through a risk-based lens, I suppose, if you're doing this. And then they move up the stack with that experience. So if you had somebody
I could technically, for example, turn around to like the CIO here and say, listen, you need to go on this one Chile course.
Correct.
Even though you're sort of 50 years old and you've got all 100%. This experience. Yeah.
100%. That's what it's there for. And it's there to get them up the stack. And they probably wouldn't do the two Chile because they don't need the technical knowledge. They would just do the one Chile. But this is where I think there is a bit of a gap in the market in terms of that education piece. It's very much an introduction to OT. But also going back to your other one, you might have somebody who's in IT who you want to move into OT. So they would need to start on the one Chile because they'll need to understand what is OT and why is it different from IT. Then you move them to the two Chile, then they're learning OT technology. And then by the time they've done the three Chile, they should be able to be put into an environment where they can do packet capture, device analysis, etc., etc. And this is not actually exclusive to OT either. So we've also got people in, for example, professional services, financial services, CISOs or CTOs, who have got big IT teams but can't hire cyber for IT. So they're doing the same thing. They're putting people who've got an IT background on our cyber courses, which are progressively training them in cyber so they could ease them into cyber roles within their organization and offer them that new route into cyber because they can't hire cyber people. So they sort of train them on the job. And again, they don't want them out for a one-year master's. That's not helpful for them in their business model. They want them trained in short, bursty courses, which is what we've provided. So yeah, it's available commercially for anyone to come and do, from CIO, CTO through to your, people on the shop floor. The other thing is you might have people on the shop floor who've been working with these manufacturing devices for years. And well, certainly in South Wales, we've got a big issue with manufacturing companies closing. So now they're out of a job. Well, actually, there's plenty of people, probably lots on this call, who are looking for people with manufacturing expertise where they understand the technology and they understand the security of how to secure that. So this is why I'm working with the Welsh government and saying, well, hang on a minute, then let's retrain those people who understand the technology. Because fundamentally, if you speak to any CISO or any CTO who's hiring from, say, a university degree in cybersecurity or anything else, they'll tell me they just fundamentally don't yet understand how the technology works. So they've got all this cybersecurity knowledge, but until they understand how the technology works, I can't put them on the job. So what we're training in these short courses is how the technology works. So we can move people from that technology-led area into the security of it. So somebody who's an ex-manufacturing shop floor person might come straight in on OT level 2 and learn all the security of it.
But that assumes that. So I get the IT to IT bit, right? So kind of already engaged in the conversation, already engaged in IT, engaged in security.
Yeah.
The people that kind of the operators, right? The people running the shop floor are not always interested in actually going on that learning journey.
Yeah.
So is there like a sort of one of the things that I learned quite early on in my career was in risk management. I was told, like, link it to the bottom line, link it to the P&L.
Yes.
Because then you're taking it from being technical to being business relevant, right? And that's worked magic for me, right? Every time I can kind of go, this is what it means for the customer. This is what it means for your bottom line. Just hang on, I'm interested in that now.
Yeah.
Is there something, and the one I'm finding here that gets people hooked is safety and production, right? So if I kind of go, look, but production's a really tricky one because a lot of these plants are operating at like 95, 96% production capability already. Is there something else you'd recommend to kind of hook these stakeholders in to kind of go, look, you don't know about this. This is what I can help you with.
Yeah. So this is why we've started to put these sort of virtual environments together and these digital twins together, because the principle then is that we can actually show what could happen. So we're actually working on a manufacturing setup now where we can show, well, if this switch is off, that doesn't work anymore, and then that's failed. And then if they see that in front of their eyes, they go, oh, crap. Yeah, well, that would be a massive problem. And he said, well, that's just basically because that legacy device it's set up in a way that anyone can access it from here, there, everywhere, whatever, do this, do that, which effectively is what they then learn on the training anyway. So it's almost like a precursor to the training, which is look, let's give you a little bit of shock factor, I suppose. That's something that we're working on at the moment, particularly in manufacturing space. To try and get that, as you say, it's the people who don't see it as a problem until it's a problem, and trying to bring that to life for them. So I can let you know when that's ready and bring them all down. Bring them down and we can show them, or we can come to you and show them.
Listen, I'm well up for something like that. James knows I like to test a few things out, and we're a global firm, right? So it's different. Every geography for us is really different. There's different sort of risk profiles. Different outcomes. Some part of the business is regulated, part of it isn't. But that cool. That look fascinating. Thank you.
No worries.
I think it's we've known about this for a while, right, Pete? It's just a case of bringing it to the table. So I really appreciate the overview of it. If we can channel any interest, consolidate it and get it over to you. As a bit of a triage exercise of what people want to learn more about or get involved in, that'd be great. So utilize myself and James guys on that. I appreciate a lot of you are remote, but I think this impact can be achieved remote as well, right?
Yeah.
And if Pete's keen to travel, then it's getting down to SA for a little hollybob. But no, I really appreciate it, guys. Really appreciate the time on it. Before
can I squeeze another question
it,
in? If we got time.
Yeah,
Just,
go for it.
So, and this is more of a macro question. I don't know how much of this you can answer, but so I didn't know that this sort of thing existed. I kind of heard about it, but it was a bit like Narnia, right? It's out there somewhere if you can find it. What's the wording here? We're likely to go through a changed government, right? This stuff is going to change at a governmental level.
Yeah.
How much of this is going to continue? How much sort of investment is going to continue in this kind of field? Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? Like, from a macro point of view, I also sit on the board of an industry forum, right? So I'm looking at this going, you hear the right things from government, but we're in an economic climate where there never seems to be enough money for anything, right? So how at risk is this? And what could we be doing as sort of industry people to try and, maintain it, maintain its kind of lifeline, if you like?
Great question. Yeah. So in terms of, we've had our first 18 months worth of funding, and we've just secured our second 3 years worth now. So that's given us a 3-year runway to get this working, and that's not at risk. That's secured, which is great. After that, we ain't getting any more. They've been quite clear that we need to be self-sustaining. So the challenge for us now is how do we keep this running? And that's why we've developed a commercial model. So the skills is all based on a commercial model. The test bed use is all based on a commercial model. We've got a team of people who can support, again, all based on a commercial model. So almost effectively we're offering services on a commercial basis. So for us going forward, what we need now is, if the industry does genuinely need this over the next couple of years, we need them to use it, to come to us and take the training and use the facilities, and work with us on building test beds. And if we can generate that traction and show that's there, hopefully we generate enough. We're a not-for-profit, right? So we're not here to make money. We're here to continue to make UK PLC safe and secure, but we need to cover our costs. So if we can cover our costs, great. If we can't cover our costs, then at least if we're covering significant amounts of our costs, then we can look to other sources then to invest in us, because effectively we're providing a service. But yeah, ultimately hopefully it's the right thing. If it's not the right thing and it's something else that the industry needs, tell us, and we can pivot. Think of us like a startup, I suppose, but with the credibility, I suppose, track record and backing of the academic institutions that we are, and with the industry partners that we have to that are helping make sure we're on track in the first place. But yeah, I mean, we're here to help you get more secure, essentially. So whatever you need, let us know, and we'll try and do what we can to help.
Cool, nice one. Thank you very much.
Basically, Amit, it's free for another year, and then another 3 years, sorry, and then you cannot use it then.
Well, that's it. If it isn't used in the 3 years, we'll have to wrap it up, which would be a shame. The facility will still be there, some of it, obviously, because it's the university set up anyway, but we'd lose the support. We wouldn't be able, the training courses won't be, because we won't have people to deliver them. The support in terms of building the digital twins, etc., won't be there, because all of these are on staff, and these are the costs that we're trying to cover. And obviously we want to continue to build these spin outs to startups as well. So like I say, in terms of the dependency model and stuff, I can link you up with them. Let's get them moving. Let's give them some use cases. Let's help them get that investment they need to grow from private equity and so on. So it's an ecosystem, right?
Yeah, no, exactly, mate. Well, that's what the alliances are as well, right? That's how we managed to keep going for the 8 years with no funding. So good effort on the funding. What use cases do you have at the moment, or is that something that you're actively seeking?
So we've got use cases. So yeah, there's lots of stuff going on in transportation at the moment, looking at energy system use cases. But so manufacturing use cases, we definitely want to do more on. So manufacturing would be one, real good example. But anything OT, really keen to sort of support on the OT, because I think that's the area globally, really, isn't it, where going back to Amit's point, not everybody gets the risk, because it isn't necessarily seen as a priority for most. Safety is priority, bottom line is priority, but how can we make people aware of what the risks are? So if we can start building, examples, use cases where we can, a lot of the stuff we've got is collateral. We can show how some of these things work. So if we build some nice use cases, it helps us promote what we can offer, and then other people coming to us. And if if your partner members are working with us and are happy to put their brand next to it as well, then it helps promote them as thought leaders and helps credentialize us in terms of what we're doing. So it's win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it makes sense, mate. Makes sense. Well, hopefully, we can get some of the community to get involved in it, right, and play that role. Thanks, Ange. Cheers, Sis. Thanks for attending. So let's hopefully get that motoring, right, for the benefit of both parties to lean on. So cool. Plenty to do.
Yeah.
We'll distribute this out to the wider, so the OT group is at around 50, 60. And obviously it's predominantly from the regions that we're in, even though people have got operations everywhere, right? So we'll get that out to them, and again consolidate it and get some introductions. So Pete's dropped his email address for Cardiff Uni into the chat, guys, so feel free to reach out direct. But yeah, if you've got any questions for us, then
and just to jump in there, Lee mentioned to Pete before the call is getting Pete into the OT group with you lot.
Yeah,
to be able to enjoy,
carry on the conversation.
Get involved in conversations, not just on this, but in general when it comes to the OT stuff. So Pete will get you added to that group as well, so everyone can, where you can get involved, and everyone knows who you are now as well. So that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Only
from
one
my side, guys, thank you for.
Sorry, James, can I ask one question from Pete? Thanks. In terms of use cases from manufacturing, can we get the list of type of use cases that you have tried and it's working? So it will give us an idea of what we could think about. It's already done. We'll look for some other use cases.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
Perfect. Cheers, Adnan. Cool. Let's keep the conversation going with you lot and Pete then. It's sort of neat.
That was just for me. It is you lot, mate.
What's weird is we've had 2 calls recently, and the Trustwave one was all Welsh people. This one's led by all Welsh people.
Yeah, it was about time. It's been 8 years, and we've this is the first 2 calls we've had Welsh people.
It was going to be justified, hasn't it? It's another 8 years' time. We might have a few more. But no, yeah, just let's keep this going, and guys and girls, let's see where it can be leveraged and utilised. Yeah, let's maximise the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
it.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you
so
much.
much.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.